Good morning. LA Pipe Smoker with you this morning. Little out of my scheduled uh, presentation. Usually I do it once a week. I think it was last Saturday I made a video, kind of gotten back into the state of things. And so today I thought, since I had the day off, that I'd make another video. And the reason behind this is to discuss recent legislation in Los Angeles and also in the state regarding flavored pipe tobacco. So what prompted this initially was yesterday the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors passed a ban on flavored tobacco. And so now within Los Angeles County, you can no longer sell flavored tobacco. It has a clause in it that allows it for this kind of gradual implementation. What's kind of telling also is that businesses will now be assessed a $778 fee to be licensed to sell e-cigarettes. Now, this is without the flavored tobacco products, and then every 2 years have to pay $142. So, typical LA County, they pass a bill and there's a fee attached to it. So, gosh, what are you going to do? We live in that kind of an age. Needless to say, small businesses in California are really pummeled both on the state level and on the local level. So I won't kind of get off into that, but that kind of stood out in their decision making. Good news is for LA County, online sales are not going to be prohibited. And of course, there's no way for the county to enforce that sort of thing. And so, at least as far as LA County goes, online sales are fine. However, brick and mortar sales of flavored tobacco will have to cease. And those retail establishments will have to pay those fees that I just mentioned. Good for me in the sense that my tobacconists, I have two, one in Santa Barbara and one in Costa Mesa. Both of those are outside of Los Angeles County, so they effectively won't be hit by that unless their local localities or local legislatures enact some sort of prohibition against flavored tobaccos. I'm not aware of anything on the radar, but even then, still, if I need to, I can get stuff online, and I still do. I think most of us shop online and get some of our tobacco products from time to time online. I try to visit my local retailer and do it that way, primarily because he's really good at getting esoterica. I mean, every month there's a full supply of esoterica, and really nice to be able to have that kind of a pipeline. The other level of legislation that's occurring is at the state level in California. And our state, pardon me while I'm going to light this throughout my presentation. I'm not quite sure why it keeps on going out because of the pipe tobacco in this case. Oh, my bladder. Let's do some housekeeping. My bladder, blatter, not bladder. My blatter, or maybe since it's in Montreal, maybe you pronounce it blatier. Let's call it blatier, all right? Just so it doesn't sound like something else. My blatier pipe, my poker, it's a sitter, as you can see in the bottom. Great pipe. I'm loving this thing. So, anyway, back to the state of California. So, the state of California has two bills, which is pretty common. There are two houses, as in most states, I guess all states. It's a bicameral system. So there's the Assembly bill and the Senate bill. The Senate bill, a little more liberal. They allow for some exemptions. Non-electric hookahs, kind of sounds like a garage band. Any sort of patent a product prior to 1/2000 or menthol flavored. Thank you, cigarette companies. So those are exempted. No such exemptions exist in the Assembly bill. So eventually they're going to wind their way through. Still lit. Got to get into the rhythm of talking and smoking. So both the bills will end up merging together and then go before Gavin Newsom, our governor. And my guess is he'll sign them. But in both bills, they mention under retailers, tobacco retailer in this state. So there's no mention of online sales. And if we're going according to English common law, whatever is not explicitly prohibited is allowed. And so I think the old online gate will remain open, at least in the state of California. So hopefully that will happen. So I don't see, at least for myself, I don't see any immediate threat to me being able to smoke an aromatic from time to time, although I tend to be more preferential towards an English or Oriental blends. The federal level is another issue. If aromatics go out the federal way, that very well could impact online sales. But we'll see what sort of political will there is to get that done. You know, it's kind of interesting. As I get older, I seem to get a little more politically conservative. There's a quotation, and I think it comes from Benjamin Franklin. And any of you that know otherwise, please leave the correction in the bucket below. But I think it goes something like this: if you're young and you're conservative, you lack compassion, and if you're old and liberal, you lack sense. So I don't know if that's true. But when I was in college, I was definitely pretty liberal. I think I could be described as probably a democratic socialist. And you think, as I got older and more conservative, or perhaps less liberal, that I would fall into some sort of ideology. And I really haven't. I think the other thing that has happened as I've gotten older is that I've become less ideological, in the sense that to make a decision about anything, I employ some sort of ideological framework and then work from that particular framework in making a decision that's based on a particular ideology. I think I've identified a framework that I use, but it's not based on any one particular ideology. In fact, the best way to describe it would be a process framework. And I became aware of this through listening to a podcast by Malcolm Gladwell. He's very liberal, but he describes it as, and I'm familiar with it, but I never thought to apply it to myself. But in thinking about it, I think that I fall into that group of people who use this. It's called casuistry. And casuistry is something developed by the Jesuits, more or less. And with my history in the Catholic Church, it would seem to make some sense. I suppose I can't remember when I started adopting this framework. As I said, it was something that was more casually developed. And so let me explain a little bit about how this works. So in casuistry, rather than letting a particular ideology inform all of your decisions, you take individual cases, and from that you compare them to set standards and decide where they fall on the spectrum. And depending upon where it falls, you make your judgment accordingly. So let me give you an example. So let's say we have a kid, kind of keeping on the flavored tobacco theme. Let's say we have a kid who starts smoking a pipe. And we'll say this kid is of age, so we'll get the legal issue out. So, and to kind of further this, the kid is smoking an aromatic blend. So we want to decide if this should be prohibited, that this activity should be prohibited. All right. So what are our guidelines? What are our limits. Well, to define an example that would be clearly something that we would prohibit would be to take a young man of legal age who is vaping and inhaling and is attracted to this because of the flavor of the substance that he is smoking. So we'll say that is going to be our markation for prohibiting something. All right. Thank you for staying lit. Thank you. So let's consider the other that would not be considered prohibitive for us. Let's say we have a longtime pipe smoker who smokes flavored tobacco, no health issues, no problem. That's clearly an example of something which we don't want to prohibit. So now that we have set our limits, now we introduce our individual case. And in this case, we have a kid who is smoking a pipe and smoking aromatic tobacco. So the question becomes, is that example closer to the accepted version of the aromatic pipe smoker, or is it closer to the teenage vapor who is attracted to the taste of and inhaling and is attracted to the taste of the tobacco? Well, I think in this instance you can see that the kid trying the aromatic pipe is probably closer to the non-inhaling pipe smoker who has had no health issues as a result of smoking aromatics. Then he is closer to the vaping kid who is inhaling and is attracted to this kind of tobacco because it's flavored. So that's an example of using casuistry as a way to make decisions, as a way of making moral decisions, so on and so forth. Now, with that said, you know, the word casuistry has a lot of baggage. So typically, if you're a philosopher and you say, oh, that's casuistry, what you're saying is that it's wishy-washy philosophy. And so, well, you know, I think perhaps it could be used that way, certainly. But I don't think necessarily it has to be something which is unreasonable. To me, it seems to recognize that no matter what sort of rule you have, there will always be instances that don't seem to fit into your rule. So rather than having some rigid set of rules, have limits, have parameters that you've thought about. And then when you see individual cases, you can make a decision relative to those particular limits. So there's a certain flexibility, but there's also an attempt to realize that not every situation is the same, and not every situation fits into a particular ideology that is workable even. So I think as I've gotten older, I've definitely kind of fallen into that sort of situation where if I'm trying to decide about something, whether something is good or not, whether something is acceptable or not, that's more or less the process that I use. And at any rate, I certainly would enjoy your comments on this, and good time to wrap up my video. Still smoking. All right, I'm happy about that. And bid you a fond adieu. I think this Saturday I'm going to do my final Jess Conowitch review on number 17. So Scottish blend, and we can talk more then. Hope you have a great day. For my Jewish brothers and sisters, I think, if I'm not mistaken, today is Yom Kippur. So I wish you the very best Yom Kippur, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.